Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Exclusives, Getting to the Soul of Business. I'm looking forward to talking in this episode, this monthly episode, with Terry Dunken, a serial entrepreneur and a Mass Tort business practitioner. Terry, I had you on the show and on the live show, and I loved our talk, so I was happy to have you back. I want to give a little bit more of your bio. I'm echoing a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm just going to mute you for 1 second. There we go. You owned a Nintendo franchise coin-operated video game distribution that became successful when Donkey Kong, one of my all-time favorite games, came along, and within 2 years made $2 million. You have a CPA license and a law degree, and today you're the managing partner at Dunken Law Firm. And in 2019, you launched the Mass Tort Institute, which helps lawyers more effectively evaluate and litigate legal claims. You're also the author of Mass Tort Secrets, the playbook for growing your mass tort business, an international bestseller. I loved our talk, and for those who want kind of a quick hitting talk, it was about 20-ish minutes, I think. They can go to my webpage. But today we're going to get a little bit deeper. And I really want to kind of rewind a little bit. I know you just celebrated your 70th birthday in Buenos Aires, so happy birthday to you. But kind of take me back 65 years, Terry, right? And kind of describe to me the mentorship and the energy that was there that you think had some level of influence on where you are today.
Be happy to. Well, first off, John, thanks for having me back again.
Yeah.
I love your show. I love the insights that you bring to the table. You're great at doing what you do. And I think, it's really cool because, I'm going to get to your question about the 5-year-old, but I think it's such a great question because as we all know today, we see so much in the media about people just making a lot of money and getting wealthy and all, and it all looks so easy. But underneath the surface of all that, the part that doesn't really come out is the reason people are being so successful is because they have found something they're really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And it's all about passion and vision and, driving to something where, you can make a difference. And whether it's for yourself or one other person or, billions of people, it's all about really finding that passion and what's going to resonate for you during your lifetime. So,
Were you raised? Hold on, I'm echoing a little bit on your end, but were you raised in a household where I'm not sure if one or both of your parents worked, but were in their passion and in their vision?
It's a great question. One of the things I would say, so, I'm towards the upper end of the baby boomers, and I was born in 51, 7 years ago. And what people don't realize that is historically, when you go read the history books, you learn about the Great Depression, which, in theory ran from 1929 to 1933. But what people don't realize is the United States, individuals didn't have any wealth. Not only that, but were fairly poor up until right after World War II happened. And then bountiful and plentiful materials came along. But to answer your question about my parents and the passion and where that's going to go, let me tell you this quick story. My dad was born in 1928. He joined the Marine Corps at 17 and a half, which is, he didn't know at the time, but, the World War II was winding down. That was early 45. And so he never served in combat, but he served his time out, came back. He grew up in Central Texas. He came to Houston to go to University of Houston on the GI Bill. And he met my mom and fell in love with her and got married. And so worked and went to school and all. And then when the Korean War came along in 1951, he got called back to active duty. And my mother was pregnant with me, and my mom's still alive. We lost my dad about 5 years ago, but my mom still tells the story about how she went out to Camp Pendleton on a train with me in her belly to go spend some time with my father. But here's the other part of the story I want to tell you. Because he'd been serving in the military and he saved up some money, my parents actually had a car. And in 1951, middle-class America, most people did not even have automobiles. But in order for my mother to go to the hospital and have me, they had to sell the car because they had to pay the hospital bill. So, times were different. So I think, going to your question about the passion, my parents, and I think, we call them the great generation, and they were a great generation. But I think, most of them, their passion was to give their children a better life than they felt they had had.
Yeah.
And obviously that generation was and has been eminently successful in doing that for all of society and mankind.
Yeah.
And but so I would say to you, my dad, one of the things that made him a great person in life is people loved him. He always had an unbelievable attitude, but he somewhat even took his highest aspirations and kind of put them to the side to make sure that his family and people he cared about had all the things that they needed and wanted in life. And so I have the utmost respect for him and the way he did it. My dad was a kind gentleman. I like to think I got a little bit of that, certainly not as well as he did. But in terms of being that 5-year-old, I was actually raised an only child till I was almost 12. And, just physiologically and mentally, the way you're raised and your family and your upbringing really dictates ultimately who you are and the way you approach life. And so, frankly, being alone as a child, at least for 12 years, I'm pretty cerebral. I'm a very voracious reader. I love to learn and grow. And I think a lot of that's because I had just so much alone time, although I loved sports and was very active, baseball and football and et cetera. Always had that passion to learn. And, my parents gave me the room to learn and grow. But so it was a very supportive family. My sister came along. We adopted her when she was 11 years old, and my parents let me be part of that process. So I was always given a lot of room to grow, but yet, frankly, not a lot of responsibilities from chores, but certainly some. But I learned the value of $1, and I learned the value of what hard work would do for you. My dad worked hard. My mom worked part-time. When she and my dad met, she worked in a radiology department at a major hospital here in Houston. And so she had medical background history. So she worked for a pediatrician part-time for a few years when I was young. But then basically, though, she was a housewife.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. What was it? I have a couple questions, but, spending so much, you talk about spending that alone time, and how do you now, with a family of your own, or through the years as you were, building your family, how did you find that alone time, right? How did you kind of recreate that space? I know as a father of almost 19 and almost 16-year-old, it's hard to find that space, but for you, that space seemed to be more relevant than maybe some.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. And the simple answer is my wife. And, I will tell you, I just turned 70. The other thing is 3 days ago, we just celebrated our 47th wedding anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And so, frankly, people that know her know she is the strength of this family. We actually ended up not having any of her own children. She did miscarry in her late 20s, and we ultimately did in vitro a little while, and that we could write a book on that. But long story short, we never ended up having our own children, but we had and have 13 godchildren. So, and it's not because of me. It's not that I'm a great godfather. My wife is an unbelievable godmother.
I bet.
But what was cool is, and didn't plan life this way. We always plan on having a family and doing all those things. But frankly, I'm still the child in this family.
Yeah.
So, I still play video games. I played Clash of Clans and Brawl Stars. And so, my Nintendo days are still with me.
Right.
But,
I just bought an Oculus 2 that should be here any day, because I want to start, I've been researching so much about metaverse and, AI and VR and, just all of this. And so I feel like I need to be more on the front lines of understanding VR and really how it works.
Yeah. Technology is just unbelievable. I remember Dan Sullivan, who runs a company called the Strategic
Oh, that's
Coach.
great.
Dan
I'm
wrote
reading his book right now. I'm reading his
which
new
one?
book.
Who
Uh,
not how?
no. His new book. I'm loving it. It's
About the gap.
Gap. Yeah. It's what's it called? It's called hold on one second. It's called Gap in the Game.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
it's great book. Great book.
Which by the way, he's been talking about the gap for over 20 years, really. He continues to evolve it and build it. But I mean, I'll tell you, I'll come back to your question, but while we're on this, I don't want to lose this. One of the best things in life that Dan did for me personally is, if you're a high achiever, what he said was, the gap is, where you are now and then where you're going and how you measure that. And it was an aha moment for me, because throughout life, I was always dissatisfied with my progress and what I had done. And what Dan shares with you is the way to look at the gap is, and to have happiness in life ultimately is, the important thing is how you measure that. And what that means is, here's where I am today. I'm going to take an action. Once I've taken the action, where am I at that point?
Right.
And the issue is, if you're going to be happy, measure the progress you've been able to make, not measure how much of what you want to accomplish you didn't get done.
Right.
I always did the former rather than the latter. And so quite honestly, when I was in my 30s and everything, I would really beat myself up.
Yeah.
And as an aside, I mean, I had the Nintendo business, with a video game distributorship business, sold that, had some video stores, sold that, and went to law school. And while I was going to law school, became a CPA. And so frankly, most people would think, in theory, I had a full-time job. I became a CPA. I got a law degree in 3 years, in theory, going part-time, which 3 years is a normal program. And at the end of that time period, I'm still beating myself up over being an underachiever. And most people would say, wow, that was, pretty darn impressive. But at that point in my life, I really felt I was not achieving my full potential. And so to learn how, Dan shares with you how to deal with the gap and everything really can be life-changing. And frankly, it's made me a much happier person learning that concept from him, 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, his concept is really good. I took a year of strategic coach, and one of the things I talk about in the class that I took was that. And so I'm loving the reminder of the book, because it is a good reminder to be present and enjoy what you are doing, what you've done, to be proud of yourself, and what you're doing. So let's kind of evolve the conversation. And so you're growing up in this house. You're a major reader. You start this business, this video game business, which at the time, if you look at Donkey Kong today, it's still a great, you're talking about a Nintendo franchise. And so how did you get into that piece of the business, right? So that was, how did just kind of walk us through a little bit about, because you're an entrepreneur, you're an attorney, right? So how did you fall into the video game business?
So just in terms of historical, I actually became the attorney after I did the video game distributorship. And so historically, I actually came out of college. We got married in 1974, and people don't know it. It wasn't a big one, but we actually were in a pretty significant recession in 1974. And I was getting married. I was still finishing up my undergrad degree, but had to go out and get a real job and everything. And in a recession, jobs were tight. And not to disparage this company at all, but I mean, I was interviewing to become a manager at Pizza Hut. And frankly, that was at the time going to be a really good job. Fortunately, my father-in-law was a partner at a major property casualty insurance agency here in Houston, and he got me a job interview. Now, I like to think he didn't get me the job, and I really don't think he did, but I at least got the interview at a company at the time called Cameron Iron Works. It's now called Cameron, and it's a division of a major oil field company. But anyways, I went to work at Cameron. So I was actually ended up in sales and marketing in the valve industry for about 7 years before I moved to the distributorship. But to answer your question, I don't know if you've ever taken the COLBY A instrument that tests.
Of course, I've taken COLBY. What's your? I can tell you what my COLBY is. Hold on. Let's see here. Where is my personality COLBY here? COLBY. Hold on. I've taken them all, Terry. Here's my COLBY. All right, I am a 5673.
Wow, that's pretty darn good. That means you really are pretty level across fact find, follow through, and quick start. All right, so mine is I'm 4-4-10-1.
Okay.
Which means I'm off the chart, innovation and creation.
Right.
And I don't know how many of the listeners understand or use the COLBY, but we actually use it in our hiring process. Every potential employee that we're serious about hiring, we have them take the COLBY in addition to some other testing that we utilize. But to know somebody's instincts really helps you figure out whether or not they're going to burn out in a given profession or occupation. So, but for me, that being that 10 and quick start, I don't know if people know how much they know about the COLBY, but the four facets are fact find, follow through, quick start, and implementer. Yeah. But so fact find is historical based. Follow through is taking past, present, future, kind of integrating it. Quick start being future based, and then implementer being present in the here and now. Well, I'm so I'm accommodating fact find, accommodating follow through, highly insistent quick start, and resistant to being in the here and now. So for me, I'm always looking to what the future is going to bring and build. And so that's a lot of the reason. So to give you the logic tree I went through as it related to the video game business, I'm sitting there looking at this, and the video games were massively popular, and you had all the U.S. manufacturers. At the time, Atari had, launched asteroids and was building up, but the old line manufacturers who originally had done pinballs were, Bally, Midway, and Williams. And these companies were also now getting into obviously video games in addition to pinball machines. And all of their popular games were being designed by Japanese companies. And so they were licensing, the intellectual property. So I'm sitting there looking at that going, well, it's only a matter of time before the Japanese designers start building their own product and launching it here in the U.S., which Sega was one of the first ones to do that. And so I went to a trade show in New Orleans trying to get a distributorship. Sega wouldn't talk to me. Konami wouldn't talk to me. Several of these companies wouldn't talk to me. And I met the two gentlemen who had the U.S. distribution rights for Nintendo. They became very, very wealthy from that. And they were about 3 years older than me. I was 31. They were about 35 each at the time. And we got along real well. And they said, go back to Houston, put $100,000 in a bank account, and we'll give you the distributorship. And so that's kind of how that happened. I thought the Japanese were going to design the games of the future, and they in fact did and continue to do so.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. When you, to forecast, and I think part of any business is forecasting and looking, like you're talking about, looking at indicators, looking at making assumptions. We're in a world right now, as we record this, it's December 2021, and this will air, in the next few months. This is a series that goes out once a month in 2022. But the world is different today, even than it was a year and a half ago. The indicators are different. The assumption sets are different. The speed of which things are happening, things are changing is different. The way the consumer buys is different. The way that we get and keep the consumer's attention is different. And so what does that mean to you today moving forward as somebody who can, kind of see what's happening? What does that mean for somebody like you when you think about when you're present today, looking 3 or 5 years out?
So I've been doing a lot of reading around this. In fact, I'm getting ready to grab a book and show it to you for me, frankly, for the next 20, 30 years, whatever my life cycle is going to be, it actually is going to be life changing for me, just from a relative perspective of where we are in history. And I'm very much a history buff, by the way. I love the past and what we can learn from it. Ray Dalio is,
yeah.
But he's really getting out here and talking now, which is interesting. He's a pretty introspective guy and who doesn't do a lot of speaking in the public. And now all of a sudden he's talking about China and having a lot of conversations. So that in and of itself should tell you something, is when Ray Dalio comes out and starts talking.
Yeah. And his book Principles is one of the best. But I want to highlight this too. You're talking about the next 20, 30 years. Most people don't realize that 1980 and 2021 are as far apart as 1980 and 1939. And so when you think of the difference of how the world has changed, I think sometimes people don't really pay attention to what's changed from 80 to 2021 and the difference of 2021 to 2041 and 51. So keep on going.
Yeah, so you're spot on. In the historical tides, the water level rises and ebbs, and we're going to be ebbing at some point here. Somehow we put off the inevitable, but it's coming, and it's going to be really ugly. And by the way, let me grab this book. I want to show you.
Yeah, grab it. I want to see it.
The Accidental Superpower.
Tell me about it.
So Peter is a geopolitical analyst, and what he does is he gives you the historical context of why the United States has become the only superpower, and why that actually is the way it will be for the real foreseeable future. And he lays out a very cogent argument. And I've read other people who have counterpoints, who disagree with him and everything. But if you were to read this book, I think you would feel, being an American, I think you'd be better about where America's place is in the global society than probably what your viewpoint is right this moment.
Mm-hmm.
But that has an impact on me, just in terms of as an investor, as a business owner. My wife and I just came back from Buenos Aires. We're considering, would we have a home there, or where else would we have homes, and that sort of thing. And so, there's all these things that you want to talk about, is, what your life cycle is going to look like and do. But to your core question, look, we're in for an ugly ride. I don't know if it starts tomorrow, in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, but, people need to be ready to hunker down and buckle up, because when the consumer does stop the spending, and at some point that is going to happen, it's going to get really ugly, and people are going to be fighting for market share, and there's going to be massive layoffs, which means people aren't going to have jobs, they're not going to spend money, and it's just going to have this cycle that we're going to go through. And
what are the indicators that you're looking at when it comes to that perspective?
Well, at the end of the day, I think consumer confidence is the biggest leading indicator of all of them. And I'm certainly no economist. I got my undergrad degree in finance, so but I'm certainly not the economist or the anthropologist, or smart enough to assimilate all the information. But I do think consumer confidence is at the very height. And and obviously the problem with China, it's a huge marketplace, even though people-wise, it's the huge market. We're still the driving force in the global society. But everybody's worried about, if the Chinese consumer stops, what does that do to our confidence here, and will our consumers stop? So I personally don't think China alone, going through like Evergrande, if you read about the Evergrande real estate, the amount of debt they have and everything, and and you read about it, and basically what I'm reading is the Chinese government's not going to let them fail. It'll become a Bank of America kind of takeover that that happened here. But if the Chinese consumers quits buying, that's going to have an impact on the global economy. And if the American consumer gets worried about that and quit spending, I think the combination of the Chinese and American consumer having low confidence, that's a recipe for disaster for the world.
Yeah. Where does the low confidence come from?
You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I think just fundamentally is, you know, do I think the world is going to be better tomorrow than it is today? I mean, you know, if I look to the future, what do I think the future looks like? And if people tend to think it's warm and bright and fuzzy and is going to continue to get better, then I think the public optimism stays. You know, and by the way, and I'd love to be an anthropologist. I don't think I'm smart enough or have the patience to do it. But I mean, people who could go study the actions that people take and then understand the basis of why they do it, I think would be a fascinating study. But I think to your question, you know, at the end of the day, it's what is the individual psyche that has having people take the actions that they take.
Yeah.
And so in terms of consumer confidence, you know, so I guess the point I was going to make is, look, I think people being out, even in a COVID, if we didn't have all the, you know, LinkedIn's and Facebook's and the touch points are where we can stay in touch with society, and especially those that are near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah,
we would be in a massive depression right now. At least I think we would. But the fact, look, my mother's 91. She's in a nursing home. We've only seen her physically during the last 2 years. It's reasonably hard on us, but it's really hard on her and her people like her. But being able to, you know, put an iPad there and get on and speak to them and just do the things you can do and continue to touch them is really, really important. And so I do think the technological revolution and evolution we've had has continued to buoy and bolster, you know, the economy, if you will. I mean, clearly it has, but I think at the end of the day, it gets down to what the public sentiment looks like and if they think their future is brighter than where they are today.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about, you know, just, you know, forecasting what people think about tomorrow, and just the idea of just helping people. Right. So in 2019, you launched the Mass Tort Institute, which helps lawyers more effectively evaluate and litigate legal claims, and also wrote a book called The Mass Tort Secrets, the playbook for growing your mass tort business, which has gone on to be an international bestseller. But for the person who's listening to this who doesn't necessarily maybe know what tort business is, right? You're growing your mass tort business. Kind of define mass tort for us first. So let's start there.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And there's very much a misconception of what that is, if people even know it all. So mass torts, we're all aware of them because we see it in the news, but this is the opioid crisis. This is the litigation that's going on against Bayer Monsanto as it relates to Roundup. This is the litigation that's going on with Johnson & Johnson around talc cases. So basically, anytime there's, to keep it simple, anytime there's a pharmaceutical or medical device that injures somebody, they manufacture so much of that product, if you will, that many times it may injure hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And if there's that many people who ultimately feel like they've been injured by a given product, if you will, then technically they would file a lawsuit to go make a claim against that manufacturer. And so that's what happens. But if there's enough claims against a given manufacturer all around the country in the federal courts and or state courts, if you think about it, let me back up and tell you the story. There was a product called transvaginal mesh that was used back for about 15 years. And then women started having, well, during the whole time that they were having problems, but it really came to a forefront. The companies continued to market this product and implanted it in literally millions of women. And at the end of the day, there were hundreds of thousands of women who felt they had serious injuries from it. And so in the federal courts, there were 105,000 lawsuits filed. And if you stop and think about it, there's no way any judicial system could go handle and try 105,000 cases.
Yeah.
Even if you had 80 or 90% of them settled, you still couldn't try 10 or 20,000 cases. It just bogs the system down. And so a mass tort is one where people have similar injuries such that this can all be adjudicated under the auspices of a federal judge in most instances. There's also some done out in California and a few other state jurisdictions. But basically what they do is they create what's called a multi-district litigation process. An MDL is the acronym. And so any of these torts where you see the commercials that people are running, if you've been injured by, fundamentally, that's probably a mass tort. I mean, it just to give people context of what's going on in commerce. And so, but what happens behind the scenes, lawyers like me are aggregating hundreds and some thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of those cases. And then they're put into the legal process such that over a period of 3 to 6 years, the evidence is discovery's done, evidence is gathered, expert witnesses are brought to light, and then there will be some trials, potentially, if it's not done as a global settlement. And ultimately, hopefully, there's some kind of a global settlement that is reached.
So you are in a way Aaron Brockovich of sorts, right? You're on mute a little bit just because I was echoing. So, but you are in the pursuit of justice, right? To help people. And so as somebody who is leading that, doing that every single day, that's got to be a very tough, you're a detective looking for clues and doing your best to help people, but it takes a long time. And as you help people, you also are kind of part of their emotional journey of it. And so as a business person, how do you compartmentalize that?
So, I mean, it's a great question. And that's why I said you're a really insightful guy. I mean, to your point, it really is. It's a, let me back up and make this overarching comment. For most people, buying a home, getting married, buying a home, having children, are the most impactful things of their life. Add to that being involved in a lawsuit, right? I mean, these are high impact, some of them good things, some of them bad things. But even if you're a plaintiff in a lawsuit, it means you feel you've been injured. And so you're going through a healing process. And so you're spot on. There's this healing process that the people have to go through. Some of this litigation cycle hopefully can be part of that healing process for them. But you're right. In mass torts take anywhere from 3 to 10 years to go through a cycle. And so there's touch points, there's information you've got to share with clients as they go through the journey. And so you've really got to, touch them often enough, but not too often that, you're a pain, but just make sure they're going to respond to you when you've got to get information from them as it relates to their specific cause of action. And so it is a balancing act. And so, we think a lot about what the client experience is going to look like.
But I want to dive deeper into this because I think, it's really difficult. One of the most difficult things for people is to bring their business home with them. One of the most difficult things for spouses is for their spouses to bring their business home with them. And this is something where there seems to be more emotional, I don't want to use the word emotional baggage, but there's more of an emotional connection, especially if you believe that the people have been wronged and trying to fight, for their rights when it takes 3 to 10 years. How do you emotionally do it where you can keep where you can stay grounded?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, one of the ways I do it personally is, I actually think I've got the personality and the mindset that I could have been a good litigator. People relate to me and tend to like me. And the key as a lawyer, if you're going to do litigation, is make sure the jury likes you and your client. But I never did that. And so to your point, those that do the litigation, it can be a 24/7 situation. I mean, Mark Lanier just did well in an opioid case here this week. And he'll have to put away 3 months of his life to go try that trial. And so it's very hard on the lawyer, on the family, and everybody. The part of the Mass Tort world where I operate is actually more on the, finding the clients, getting their cases worked up, and then we usually co-counsel with the litigating firms who go fight the good fight in the courtroom. So I really am more of that's why, frankly, my book is written as a business practitioner, because yes, I'm a lawyer and I certainly represent clients, and I make sure I've got the best co-counsel representation I can, so we optimize the value for my clients. But to your point, just about owning your own business, it's really hard to keep, church and state separated when it comes to being a business owner, and especially if you're passionate about it, it tends to spill over and bleed over. One of the biggest mistakes I made going back, I mean, I was a tax, and estate and tax lawyer for 25 years before I got into this career. That was when I came out of law school. And one of the mistakes I made was in the early 90s, I traveled all over the country working with some of the most affluent families in our country. And I wanted to figure out how I could be more accessible to them. So I got a pager. That was high tech back in the early 90s. Biggest mistake I made, because the problem with the pager, mentally, people thought if they paged you, you were going to immediately call them back. Well, we didn't even have mobile phones then. And so but even if I had, I would go spend a full day with the client doing nothing but working on their situations. I couldn't jump out and go take this phone call and that phone call. So I kept a pager for about 2.5 weeks and I scrapped it. I mean, it just made no sense. Now, unfortunately, we all have pagers, mobile phones. I mean, we have it. I mean, people just think, they're going to ping you and you're going to get right back to them. And they tend to ping you 24/7. And so it is hard to set those boundaries, but I think every entrepreneur, and I know work-life balance is, kind of a misnomer, but somebody does need to define what their work-life balance should look like, if you will.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what happens when you lose and you have to tell people bad news? Because I would think that's got to be really hard. I know I'm not saying that you're not great at what you do, but at any point, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. How do you do that? How do you reconcile it? And then how do you move on from it?
Again, it's a great question. Yeah, it's really, really hard. And, to your point, not only do we lose, but here's one that people probably haven't thought about. Even when we win, many times to the client, it feels like a loss. And let me share with you what I mean by that. So Roundup, it is alleged, helps cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancers. And people die from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancers. And so many of the actions that are bought as it relates to the Roundup product is because somebody in the family probably has suffered a death. And so after 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, when it goes through this process, if there's a global settlement, and if there's a global settlement, nobody's going to get, I mean, people see where there's a $2 billion, by the way, there was a $2 billion verdict for a couple on Roundup, and people see that in the headlines. They think, holy cow, yeah, I deserve $2 billion. Well, the average Roundup settlement is coming in around $100,000. And so how do you go tell a family that, your loved ones, their life's worth $100,000? So even if you don't win and have a zero goose egg, it feels like a loss to the family. So those are the conversations we have to prepare for and try to deal with. And it's hard to do. And as an aside, it's one of the core reasons I created the Mass Tort Institute, because the marketing has become so good. Is good news. We find lots of clients. The bad news is we find so many clients that the companies don't have the pocketbooks to write the checks to all the people that everybody individually probably deserves. So we've actually done too good of a job finding clients to represent. So we've got to get really better at making sure that each client is represented to the best of our ability, and we really do maximize the values for these clients.
Yeah.
And so that's at the core of what the Mass Tort Institute is we want people to be better business people and think about all the facets of our operation.
Yeah. Talk about the Institute a little bit.
So really the precept was I actually did litigation funding for about 5 years before I put my shingle back out and became a lawyer, which was about 7 years ago, representing clients. And so as I've gone through this journey, I've had some arrows in the back. I've learned some lessons. I will say this to you, and I don't think it's just aging. In some regards, I think I've gotten smarter and wiser about business. But I do think that the journey I've gone through has been one of the most difficult journeys that we've done. And part of that is because there's so many facets to running a successful law firm / business in this industry. And so, as you're probably aware, when you go to law school, there are no business classes at all, right?
It amazes me. I often think, Terry, that I should teach a class at law school and at medical school on how to business plan and start a business. So I'm waiting for my phone to ring. I'm waiting for Harvard to fly me out to teach a class or something.
Well, I mean, they absolutely should. I mean,
Yeah.
I could get off. So my aunt, who in my book I share as my mentor in life, she got her doctorate in education in curriculum and instruction, and she was very successful. Her whole business career arc was elementary school teacher, assistant principal, district superintendent, deputy superintendent of curriculum and instruction, and then she became the superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, which, by the way, $1.6 billion budget, 35,000 employees. That's a business. So that's my mentor in life. But we would have these debates about, the education process and what we teach and train people and everything. And, quite candidly, I don't think I personally don't believe the education system is structured in a way that it's teaching and training our people for the future. Yeah. And to your point, spot on, so many of these disciplines where people learn a trade or a craft, if you will, being a doctor, being a lawyer, how do you then go turn it into a business? And so I totally agree with you. I think there needs to be a lot of revamping and restructuring in terms of, what curriculum should be shared and presented. And by the way, it's getting a lot harder to be successful in business. I mean, I really do believe that it is so competitive. It was a lot easier to run a Nintendo franchise in 1982 than it is to go run a law firm or a podcast enterprise and, whatever. I mean, there's just so much competition. Everybody in their minds is going after, same market share. And, frankly, and the economy was localized. We're now truthfully a global economy. And, and you're fighting for the bandwidth of everybody else in theory that distributes a podcast, right? It's not, you're not just fighting against the Business Coach podcast people. You're fighting against every other podcaster, the Joe Rogans of the world. I mean, if, we all only have so much time. And so Correct. Where are we going to dedicate and allocate that time? So at the end of the day, we've all got to learn how to bring increment strong value to our clients.
Amen to that. Where will you be allocating your time the next 10 years?
So continuing to, this is the space I want to stay in. I really feel I've planted my flag for the last time. I really want to continue to make a difference with fellow lawyers. So in the Mass Tort Institute, one of the things we're doing is we're creating a program called the Certified Mass Tort Paralegal, because the Mass Tort practice of law is not like a traditional law firm. And so we've got actually to train people, get them ready for jobs. So when they step into a job in a intake situation, medical record review situation, that sort of thing, that they can come add value, and we don't have to train them from the ground up. Right now, we can't. Somebody who went to paralegal college, believe it or not, in my firm, less than 7% of my team are actually paralegals. I mean, I don't need a lot of paralegals. I need customer support people. So it really is about continuing to try to help hone the craft of what we do as practitioners. And so that part of me is my giving back, if you will. The flip side of that is, I continue to want to elevate the game. I love the marketing aspect. I came out of sales and marketing, and that really is still my passion. And so I'm involved in a couple of ventures where we're really trying to elevate the marketing game.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of fun. So that's what I see for the next 10 years, continuing to, cultivate and help people train so they can come get really nice jobs and add value to law firms, and then continue to cultivate the marketing craft of how we attract our clients.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I have no doubt that you will continue to elevate the game. Quick speed round. You ready, Terry?
Yeah.
Behind every strong man is a stronger woman. You talked about your wife as just an incredible human being. She sounds like that. Best piece of wisdom that you've learned from her?
Just always be kind and supportive to people.
Okay, I love it. Minus the book that you shared earlier, what's another one of your favorite books?
Wow, I mean, let me try to distill it down. I would say an oldie but goodie, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
So good. Yeah, so good. Best piece of wisdom your parents gave you?
Just always be humble.
Best piece, biggest lesson you learned from a client?
I'm sorry, cut for a second. Biggest piece of advice from?
The biggest lesson you learned from a client?
I won't name who the client is, but I did planning for a client who built a company that, he's now on the Forbes 400 list. And he created 2 trusts that when he died was going to provide educational opportunities for the people of the town where a lot of his employees live. And this, he's still living, but this will have a huge impact on that town and that state and society. And so, and nobody knows that he's done that. And so it's just to be able to go make a difference and have people, not look for the attaboys out of what you do in life, I think was what I learned from that. So,
I love it.
And as an aside, like for instance, like the Mass Tort Institute, it's not about me at all. I mean, this is about everyday people leaning in and making a difference and trying to add value to one another's lives.
Yeah. Well, you are elevating the game, Terry. What I love about my podcast is I get to meet amazing people. I met you through my podcast. And what I love about this series is this series just kind of takes the listener into raising a higher level of consciousness. And the work that you do is helping so many people. The intent is so clean. Your humility shines through, and your hard work to make a difference makes a difference. And I appreciate, I've enjoyed getting to know you, and appreciate and again enjoy staying in touch with you as you continue to elevate the game, because I think just the energy that you put out elevates the energy of everybody around you. So I appreciate you. Think community. Feel free to reach out to Terry. Terry, tell everybody where they can connect with you, learn more about you, buy your book, all that other great stuff.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, and you know, you know, there are a lot of people go, "Why the heck would I want to read about a lawyer?" But the book is Mass Tort Secrets, and you can get it on Amazon. So, and it's Dunken. So if you just put that in, there's not many people with the Duncan spelling of that last name. And then it is actually, if you want to go look at Mass Tort Institute, it's masstortinstitute.com. And I think you post our LinkedIn, right? I won't give everybody, but, you know, but we've got if they want to go look at our LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter feeds.
Yeah, well, we'll link to everything.
Cool.
Well, that's great. Well, Terry, thank you very much. Think community. Thank you for tuning in. And Terry, I'll let you have the last word. Anything you want to share in closing?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would share is, you know, always be learning and listening. And I learn as much from people in actually more from people in other industries than I do from people in my own industry. And so I'm always cross reading and learning and growing. I think there's and frankly, that's why one of the reasons I say and frankly, all the money I make off the book, I give that to charity. So I don't really care about selling books or not. But, you know, the point I would make is, though, you know, there are lessons to be learned from other people's disciplines and their journeys. And so if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's always important to be learning and growing. That's, I think, the takeaway I would share.
We'll end on that. Thanks, Terry. That was great.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
We'll be talking. Thanks.